This podcast contains murder and mayhem, guts and gore, adult language, and sexual content. Exactly what you came here for. All the listener discretion is advised. Welcome, I am your mistress of the macabre, Sarah Tiara. Grab your Ouija board, light the candles, and grab your jar of human teeth because you and I are going to escape for a bit. Pour yourself a cocktail, pull the window shades closed, and find a cool, dark, quiet place. Because right now we delve into the macabre. Hello and welcome back to the Mistress of the Macabre podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Tiara. Today we are going to dive into the case of the toxic lady, Gloria Ramirez. As a note up top about this episode, Gloria was a normal, wonderful person. This is not to sensationalize what happened to her, but it is an investigation of the facts. The way this case was handled by officials and publicized was terrible, but a phenomenon did occur that day, and we are looking into that occurrence. But whatever did happen that day, it was not Gloria's fault in any way. Her family was not happy with how things were handled or publicized, and I'm saying right now that I'm looking into what happened and not going to blame Gloria or make her or her family look bad. I just think the investigation was shit, and I would like to have answers as to what happened. So we are going to discuss it. Gloria Cecilia Ramirez, born on January 11th, 1963, was an American woman from Riverside, California, who was dubbed the Toxic Lady or the Toxic Woman by the media when several hospital workers became ill after airborne exposure to her body and blood. Ramirez had been admitted to the emergency room suffering from late-stage cervical cancer. While treating Ramirez, several hospital workers fainted and others experienced symptoms such as shortness of breath and muscle spasms. 5 workers required hospitalization, one of whom remained in an intensive care unit for 2 weeks. Ramirez herself died from complications related to her cancer, allegedly, shortly after arriving at the hospital on February 19, 1994. The incident was initially considered to be a case of mass hysteria. That is why we're doing this case as a tie-in to the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. I am still so pissed off about the Mad Gasser of Mattoon being labeled as mass hysteria, and then when I started looking into this being labeled as mass hysteria, I was just as pissed off, if not even more so, which is why we're doing this case. An investigation by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory proposed that Ramirez had been self-administering dimethyl sulfoxide as a treatment for pain, which converted into dimethyl sulfate, an extremely poisonous and highly carcinogenic alkaline agent, via a series of chemical reactions in the emergency room. This theory has been endorsed by the Riverside Coroner's Office and published in the Journal of Forensic Science International. Stop publishing some bullshit that ain't true, okay? But what really happened to Gloria Ramirez? Let's dig into the case from the very beginning. Gloria's boyfriend, Johnny, told emergency dispatchers that Gloria had been struggling with nausea and vomiting throughout the day. Whatever was wrong with her seemed to be escalating, and Johnny requested an ambulance to take Gloria to the hospital. At about 8:15 p.m. on the evening of February 19, 1994, Gloria Ramirez, who was now suffering from severe heart palpitations, was brought into the emergency room of the Riverside General Hospital in Riverside, California by paramedics. She was extremely confused and was suffering from tachycardia, which is the medical term for a heart rate over 100 beats per minute, and Cheyenne-Stokes respiration, which is a specific form of periodic breathing characterized by a crescendo-decrescendo pattern of respiration. She was answering questions in incoherent sentences. A terminal cancer patient like Gloria Ramirez was nothing new to the Riverside ER team. She was immediately triaged and time-proven techniques were quickly applied. First, an IV of lactate solution was employed, a standard procedure for stabilizing possible blood and electrolyte deficiencies. Next, the trauma team sedated Ramirez with injections of diazepam, midazolam, and lorazepam to sedate Ramirez. Thirdly, they began applying oxygen with an AM bag, which forced purified air directly into Ramirez's lungs, rather than hooking up a regular on-demand oxygen supply. So basically, they sedated her, hooked her up to an IV of fluids, and began a hand pump bag for her breathing. Gloria's skin began to look like it was covered in an oily substance, described as an oily film by some in the room, which was most definitely not sweat. Then, the staff noticed a fruity, garlic-like odor that they thought was coming from her mouth. Registered nurse Susan Kane drew blood from Ramirez's arm and immediately noticed an ammonia-like smell coming from the syringe tip when she removed it from the catheter. Kane handed the syringe to Maureen Welsh, a respiratory therapist, and then Kane leaned closer to Ramirez to try and trace the unusual odor source. Kane passed the tube to Julie Gorchinski, a medical resident who noticed yellowish-brown colored particles floating in the blood, as well as confirming the ammonia odor. Dr. Humberto Ocha, the ER in charge, also observed the peculiar particles and gave a fourth opinion that the syringe smelled of ammonia. Susan Kane stood up from Ramirez, who was still alive at this time, and felt faint. Kane moved towards the door and promptly passed out, being caught in the nick of time before bouncing her head off the floor. Julie Gorczynski also succumbed. She was put on a gurney and removed, just as Maureen Welsh presented with the same symptoms of being overcome by a noxious substance. By now, everyone near Gloria Ramirez was feeling ill. Ocha himself now was ill and ordered the ER be evacuated and for everyone, both staff and patients, to gather in the open parking lot where they stripped down to their underclothes and stuffed their outer garments into hazmat bags. I would like to say Ocha did the right thing, honestly, and I can't imagine how tricky and just like chaotic it would be to evacuate an ER with people hooked up on machines and like, I don't even know how that would work, but he wouldn't have done that for no reason, right? Like, as the person in charge of that ER, he definitely did the right thing and something definitely was happening. So Ramirez remained on an ER stretcher. A secondary trauma team quickly donned hazmat personal protection equipment and went back to give Ramirez what little help was left. They did CPR until 8:50 p.m. when the supervising doctor declared Gloria Ramirez to be dead. At 8:50 p.m., after 45 minutes of CPR and defibrillation, Ramirez was pronounced dead less than 1 hour after her boyfriend had called 911. The cause of death was declared kidney failure related to her cancer. Also, would like to interject here, it was not her cancer that brought her to the ER, right? With the nausea and the vomiting and whatever was going on. That was not her cancer, that was something else entirely. The 23 people who were in Ramirez's vicinity became ill, and 5 were hospitalized. A total of over 20 symptoms of central nervous system maladies and malfunctions, such as muscle spasms, weakness, and headaches, were reported. In order to handle the body, a special team arrived in hazmat suits. The team searched the ER for any signs of poison gas, toxins, or other foreign substances. The hazmat team didn't find anything that could suggest what had made the medical staff ill. The team then put the body in a sealed aluminum casket. An autopsy didn't happen until almost a week later and in a special room where the autopsy team conducted its work in hazmat suits as a precaution. Meanwhile, Riverside Hospital staff had to treat their own. 5 workers were hospitalized, including Susan Kane, Julie Gorczynski, and Maureen Welsh. Gorczynski suffered the worst symptoms and spent 2 weeks detoxifying in the ICU. Overall, 23 people reported feeling sick. The toxic lady drew worldwide attention. Truly, there are endless newspaper articles about this case. No one in medical science had experienced this, nor had anyone heard of it. How could a dying woman radiate enough toxins to poison so many people, yet leave no pathological trace? Let's see what we can find. So, I think it's important to tell you now that Gloria had been diagnosed with cancer 6 weeks prior to this incident, and it was not the prognosis that it was fatal. Gloria was scheduled to begin radiation therapy in a few days at another hospital, so she had not begun radiation. If you're thinking radiation somehow had something to do with this, no, you can cross that off the list. The fact that she had not yet begun cancer treatment is reported most often. One article alone said that her sister thinks she may have started chemo, but it's largely reported that she had not, and in my personal opinion, due to the fact that she was unemployed, I would wager that she had not started, and that complications from chemo treatments can be eliminated from this whole mess of a story. Because if she's unemployed, are you really going to go out of pocket to start chemotherapy? I don't think many people have the means to do that, so I don't think she had started yet. The mystery of the gas lady remained unsolved for months until investigators finally announced that they had cracked the case in September of the same year. The Riverside County Health Department called in California's Department of Health and Human Services, which put 2 scientists, Doctors Ana Maria Osorio and Kirsten Waller, on the case. I know what you're thinking. 2 female doctors on the case? This might actually be handled properly. Well, they interviewed 34 hospital staff who had been working in the ER on February 19th. Using a standardized questionnaire, which is really how you get to the bottom of shit, Osorio and Waller found that the people who had developed severe symptoms, such as loss of consciousness, shortness of breath, and muscle spasms, fainting, nausea, and temporary paralysis, tended to have certain things in common. People who had worked within 2 feet of Ramirez and had handled her intravenous lines had been at high risk. But other factors that correlated with severe symptoms did not appear to match a scenario in which fumes had been released. The survey found that those afflicted tended to be women rather than men, and they all had normal blood tests after the exposure. They declared that the hospital workers suffered from an incident of mass hysteria or mass psychogenic illness. That's right. Just immediately were like, oh, it was mainly women? Mass hysteria. Didn't matter that they were women doctors. Also, interview people. Don't give someone a fucking questionnaire. What are you doing? Anyways, what the fuck? Ladies, you didn't do a good job here. Gorczynski denied that she had been affected by mass hysteria and pointed to her own pre-incident health record, which was basically spotless. However, following the incident in the emergency room, she had developed a number of medical issues. let me tell you. After the exposure, she spent 2 weeks in the ICU with breathing problems. She developed hepatitis and avascular necrosis in her knees. When asked her opinion of the department's conclusion, Dr. Gorczynski replied first with a textbook definition of the illness as being, quote, the occurrence in a group of people of physical symptoms suggesting an organic illness but resulting from anxiety or other psychological stresses, end quote. She then continued by adding her personal opinion and chose not to reserve her feelings. Quote, the health department's report is bullshit. They have come up with conclusions based on only partial data. They did not refer to my medical records or the toxicology report from the coroner's office or wait until the final analysis of a still unidentified chemical, end quote. Dr. Gorczynski's physician echoed her conviction by adding that, quote, she had too many things wrong with her to make it hysterical bone necrosis, elevated liver and pancreatic enzymes, gastritis, hepatitis, and unexplained crystals in her own blood that were seen by a doctor and a nurse in different hospitals, end quote. These two bitches are getting it right, unlike the other two. Yeah, you can't hysteria all of those things into being. Also, once again, like in the Mad Gasser case, did they take into account how many of the staff that day were women, right? That affects the way you're going to analyze the data. Let's say if 80% of the staff in the whole hospital that night were women, then the likelihood of those working on Gloria would also be a higher percentage of women, and therefore just based on the majority of who was working there, they would be women. And therefore the people getting sick would also be women. It's not just women are hysterical as a blanket statement, right? Like not just women are the only ones thinking they got sick, but no, mainly it's women getting sick because it's women that are working that day. Whatever, clearly they're just all hysterical. Hysterical bitches, they're so annoying. And they need to have their pelvic walls massaged by a man, and then they'll be fine. So this is gonna get even worse. This is a fucking shit show. Officials conducted 3 autopsies. One occurred 6 days after her death, another 6 weeks after her death, and then directly before her burial. The Riverside Coroner's Office did the first autopsy and closed the case but did not solve the mystery. Authorities say they may never know what caused the workers to get sick and pass out that night. Coroner Scotty Hill reported that Gloria died due to the cancer that caused her kidneys to fail. Quick little interjection here of doctory stuff. So when people die and you don't really know why, this generally happens in older folks. They will go to something on their medical record that they do have and put that as the cause of death. Does that mean that that killed them? No. So they're going to something on her record, which was the blockage in her kidneys due to her cancer, and declaring that as her cause of death. But with those other older folks that doctors do that with, they don't have a scenario like this going on at the same time. This is a whole other thing. Like you can't do that in this case with all this other shit going on and people getting sick. It's not the same situation. They do that when someone dies naturally and they don't really know why, but there's no homicide, there's no poisoning. It's just a regular natural death. So this is a dumb move on Coroner Scotty Hill's part. Hill's chief deputy said the fumes were nothing more than the odor of death. Quote, the odor of death, end quote. Like hospital ER staff don't know the difference. Okay, sir. The coroner's office upset the family by doing a midnight autopsy performed under elaborate security precautions while television cameras rolled outside the morgue. The family was told of the findings 15 minutes before they were announced to the press. Hill confirmed the investigation had help from 6 prestigious forensic labs and experts over the course of 10 weeks and cost, quote, hundreds of thousands of dollars, end quote. Yet you found nothing. The family states that their loved one was treated like a, quote, freak of nature, end quote, and although it might have been the safe way to proceed, they also are not wrong. Like characters in a sci-fi thriller, doctors treated the autopsy as if they were embarked on a mission into the unknown. Airtight suits, two-way radios, gas masks, oxygen tanks, and even a practice run. Pathologists took extraordinary precautions as they tried to figure out why the fumes coming from Gloria's body knocked out the crew who was treating her. Doctors planned to work 30 minutes at a time under a specially constructed dome designed to catch escaping fumes during the autopsy. They were to be the only people allowed in the building during the procedure. 2 hours after the autopsy was to have begun, doctors were still practicing to make sure it would go smoothly. Quote, we're dealing with an unknown right now, end quote, said Dan Cupido, chief deputy coroner for Riverside County. Shortly before 10 p.m., a pair of industrial hygienists in shiny yellow airtight suits entered the sealed area where the special coffin was. They opened the sealed coffin of Ramirez for the first time since the weekend events that triggered the elaborate body handling procedures. The pair of suited workers began an elaborate post-mortem procedure of taking air samples. Their work was monitored by rescue experts watching them via closed-circuit television. The industrial hygienists were preparing the way for the pathologists to conduct the actual autopsy, which was expected to last into the morning. In preparation for Thursday's autopsy, hygienists took air samples from the body bag inside the casket. Outside of the room, firefighters inflated 6 bright bright-colored children's wading pools where the autopsy team was to be hosed down after the procedure. As a further precaution, the 4-member team was to be kept under examination for 12 hours at a hospital after the autopsy. Quote, "It's better this way than to have them go in without the proper precautions and end up in a hospital," end quote, said Joan Letbetter, spokeswoman for the Riverside Fire Department. Preliminary blood tests on some of the people who got ill suggested the toxic agent was organophosphate, a chemical used in pesticides. Pathologists had two-way radios to summon help from the two hazmat specialists outside the building in case of trouble. As a note here, it is generally known in any medical field that people who are alive make you ill. You can catch things from them. They are going to make you sick if they have something contagious. It is also known by people in the death care industry that the thought of dead bodies making you ill is completely not true. That was propaganda. If you remember from our old-timey death care episode, that old-timey undertakers were really good at marketing, and they proposed to the public that people shouldn't handle their family members or their own dead because dead bodies would make you sick. That is completely not true. And this guy is a fucking coroner, so he should know that. So all of this, I mean, it is a lot, especially when dead people don't make you sick. It's a lot. And I can understand why any family would be really upset by all of this. Also, this whole time with all this shit going on in the closed circuit TV, the media are present. There are television camera crews in that room watching this all happen. They are also outside the morgue filming this all happening. So it's a lot. It's a lot going on for sure. Following that shit show, Coroner Hill's chief deputy released his first statement saying that Ramirez didn't die of natural causes and raising the possibility of a toxin in her body that made the staff ill. He later released a statement that the first statement he made was wrong and was, quote, based on preliminary tests, some of which were proved to be erroneous, end quote. There was no external toxic substance detected that was related to the body, he said. Quote, "It proves they never had any evidence that she was a public health risk," end quote, said attorney for the family, Ron Schwartz. The Ramirez family believes something went wrong at the hospital and accused the county of trying to shift the blame to the patient. They did not accept the official explanation. Schwartz said, quote, "I think it's a pretty pathetic approach for public officials in terms of making excuses and trying to clear themselves," end quote. The county did a second autopsy and did not release any information at all. The Ramirez family are confused and very hurt, said Schwartz, and still in the dark about what happened before and after her death. The investigation into Ramirez's death was troubled from the beginning. A top-level investigator in the county coroner's office who was in charge of the Ramirez case committed suicide a month into the probe. The official, Stephanie Albright, quote, "may have been under pressure," end quote, from the case, said Deputy Coroner Dan Cupido. How much you want to bet this guy's a fucking asshole? Then the county announced that a key piece of evidence, the syringe used to draw Ramirez's blood in the emergency room, had been inadvertently discarded. Of course it was. Maggie Ramirez Garcia, Gloria's sister, spoke in April of 1994 and voiced her disdain for the official investigation. Quote, "It takes them 10 weeks to say she died of natural causes. I don't believe anything the county officials or the coroner says," end quote. Girl, yeah, I'm here with you. The hospital itself underwent at least 9 different investigations and received a clean bill of health, said Administrator Tommy Hatfield. Quote, "The facilities were operating safely and effectively while Ms. Ramirez was in our emergency room," end quote. The hospital facilities, plumbing, and ventilation system were all inspected. The hospital does not know what caused people to faint that day. Quote, "No toxic substances were found in the area of the flush basin near where Ramirez was treated," end quote. Hospital officials gave reporters a look at the emergency room ventilation system during a news conference, pointing to the fact that fumes could not have come from within the hospital. Quote, "I think it's a pretty pathetic approach for public officials to show various stages of air filtration and trying to clear the air ducts. They're making excuses," end quote, Schwartz said. He loves to call people pretty pathetic. And you know what? I'm here for it. He's shady, but also correct. County officials said their investigation exonerated conditions at the public hospital, the county's largest health and trauma center. Riverside General has a history of problems with ventilation in patient treatment areas, including the emergency room, according to state workplace safety records. In April of 1993, the California Occupational Safety and Health Administration notified Riverside General that the first floor emergency room was permeated with sewer gas from a drain. The hospital also was cited in 1991 when 2 employees sought medical treatment after a possible leak of hazardous gas from a sterilizer. In 1992, the hospital was notified that an inspection found algae growing in a water reservoir. I'm telling you, every single case that I've researched, you just scratch a little bit beneath that surface and you will find everything you're looking for. Thomas DeSantis, a county spokesman, acknowledged some previous ventilation problems but said the emergency room's vents were checked by several independent inspectors as a result of the February 19th incident, and the hospital was given a, quote, clean bill of health, end quote. The Ramirez family contends the hospital has portrayed Gloria Ramirez as a, quote, toxic monster, end quote, to conceal its own possible culpability in her death. "I honestly believe my sister may have lived if she hadn't gone into that emergency room that night," said Maggie Ramirez Garcia, Gloria's sister. Quote, "I don't know what the county is afraid of, but we want answers," end quote. A noted forensic pathologist not involved in this case commented that the hospital's original version of events was, quote, very interesting and very misguided, end quote. Quote, there's no way fumes can come out of a body and hurt people. That idea went out with the Dark Ages, end quote, said Michael Baden, former chief medical examiner for New York City, in a telephone interview. Quote, this kind of thing gives death a bad name. Dead bodies don't make people sick, end quote. Hey! I just said that. You tell him, Michael Baden, because if y'all ain't gonna listen to me, maybe you'll listen to former chief medical examiner Michael Baden of New York City. Frustrated with finding absolutely fucking nothing, the coroner, who was way outside of his jurisdictional boundaries, turned to outside help. He found it at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories near San Francisco. Hold on, there's a problem. Lawrence Livermore initially wasn't in the medical or toxicological business. They were nuclear weapons makers with a busy mandate back in the Cold War era. Now, by the 1990s, their usefulness was waning, and so was their funding. So they decided to broaden their horizons by creating the Forensic Science Center. Brian Anderson, the center's director, took on the Toxic Lady case. What are his credentials? Couldn't fucking tell you. Probably not any. The coroner gave Anderson all the biological samples from Ramirez's autopsy as well as the air trapping containers. Anderson set about using a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer analysis, which would have been the same process the Riverside County toxicologist would have used to come up with a nothing to see here folks result. But Anderson did find something new to see. He found traces of dimethyl sulfoxide, or DMSO, in Ramirez's system. Not a lot of it, just a trace, but clearly it was there. Anderson felt he was onto something. Livermore hypothesized, you know, when you're investigating something or doing science and you have a square box and then you have a bunch of shit that's round and you're like, but it has to fit in the square box, so you just shove it in there and you're like, oh look, it's perfect fit. That's the antithesis of how you do research or science or medicine. So he's like, okay, I'm gonna solve this by shoving all of the shit into a box that it doesn't fit into. Surprise. Happens every fucking episode. So, okay, this fucking idiot at Livermore Anderson hypothesized that Ramirez had been using dimethyl sulfoxide, DSMO, a solvent most commonly used as a degreaser, as a home remedy for pain. You heard that right, but wait, it's actually worse than you think. Users of this substance report that it has a garlic-like taste. So are they saying that she ate it? Because that's weird. Also, who reported the taste of it? Why did they taste it? Who tasted this? Sold in gel form at hardware stores, a topical application to Ramirez's skin could allegedly explain the greasy appearance of her body, and then if she also ate it, could maybe explain the fruity, sweet, garlicky odor coming from her mouth. This is what this fucking idiot is saying. Livermore scientists theorized that the DMSO in Ramirez's system, here's where it gets great. So like, this didn't happen because she was allegedly coating her body in DMSO and also eating it. From here, we need like 25 more steps to answer what happened at the hospital. So buckle the fuck up. All right. So these idiots at Livermore are like, okay, so if she has a tiny trace of DMSO in her system, she coated her whole body in it and then she ate it too, to have that tiny little amount. Okay, first of all, no. But then, like, that doesn't cause toxic gas. So they're like, well, maybe it built up in her system because of a urinary blockage caused by her kidney failure, caused by her cancer. Oxygen then, administered by the paramedics, remember they had a handbag, they were giving her oxygen, that would have combined with the DMSO to form dimethyl sulfone, DMSO2. DMSO2 is known to crystallize at room temperature, and crystals were observed in some of Ramirez's drawn blood. We're not done yet. We're like halfway there. Okay, so then electric shocks administered during emergency defibrillation could have then maybe converted the DMSO2 into dimethyl sulfate DMSO4, which is a highly toxic dimethyl ester of sulfuric acid, which exposure to that would have caused maybe the reported symptoms of the emergency room staff. But we're not even done. There's a little more. Livermore scientists also wondered, there's been a lot of that, if the change in temperature of the blood drawn from the 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit of Ramirez's body temp to the 64 degrees Fahrenheit of the emergency room may have also contributed to the conversion from DMSO2 into DMSO4. Okay. Did you guys get all that? It's a whole bunch of fucking bullshit nonsense, basically, is what it is. And all of this shit would have had to happen, like, simultaneously. Also, like, it's never happened before in the history of time. Even if this could happen this way. But again, did they test this theory to see if that's what would happen? No, they didn't. They just hypothesized that's what happened. They didn't test it. No one knows if this is even possible because no one fucking tested it. So the theory of the DMSO is that Ramirez may have covered her skin in DMSO as a possible way to cure her late-stage cervical cancer. For, like, who the fuck would do that? No one. It's degreaser. DMSO was labeled a toxic substance in 1965. The reasons for Ramirez's alleged use of the toxic substance on her skin might go back again, we're stretching all of this, but might go back to when DMSO was all the rage as a cure-all, allegedly. Research in the early 1960s led doctors to believe that DMSO could relieve pain and reduce anxiety. Athletes would even rub DMSO cream on their skin to try to relieve aches in muscles. Then a study in mice showed DMSO could ruin your eyesight. The fad stopped for the most part. DMSO gained an underground following as a cure-all for many types of ailments, allegedly. By the late 1970s, the only way to get this substance was as a degreaser in hardware stores. The DMSO found in degreasers was 99% pure as opposed to a less concentrated form that was in muscle creams in the 1960s. As a gas, dimethyl sulfate vapors destroy cells in people's eyes, lungs, and mouth. When this vapor gets into the body, it can cause convulsions, delirium, and paralysis. Of the 20 symptoms described by medical staff that night, 19 of them match symptoms of people who have exposure to dimethyl sulfate vapors. If the medical staff didn't suffer from mass hysteria or stress, is it possible they suffered from dimethyl sulfate poisoning? This theory adds up to the facts of the case. Can you hear the sarcasm in my voice? Spoiler alert, no it doesn't. It doesn't at all. But let's pretend. We're gonna go down every avenue as always. DMSO cream would explain the oil that doctors noticed on Ramirez's skin. It would also explain the fruity, garlicky odor coming from her mouth. Did Gloria Ramirez use DMSO to try to relieve the pain caused by her cancer? The family of Gloria Ramirez have always vehemently denied that Gloria owned or used DMSO cream. Analysts and experts at the Livermore Labs did not know any of this. This is like a story they pulled out of their ass. There's no official record that she even owned it. It wasn't even found in her house. Imagine how much you'd have to use. Also, there is the fact that this analysis was based on working theories and knowledge of DMSO, and the conditions of Gloria's death were impossible to recreate. It was a situation unlike any documented before, and it was impossible to test if similar results would unfold in a dying individual with the same conditions. Once again, all hypothesis, not tested. This theory has become the unofficial answer as to what happened to Gloria Ramirez, besides the mass hysteria. It's the two. If you look online, it's either mass hysteria or this DMSO cream shit. I will say the findings by the Lawrence Livermore Labs have been disputed by other scientists and medical experts in the years since they released that load of fucking horseshit. Melody Barnett, who is married to Ramirez's nephew, said Ramirez loved her children too much to commit suicide by swallowing some sort of weird poison. But the coroner liked it. Of course he did, this fucking guy. So did many leading scientists. I doubt that. The coroner released Anderson's report as an addendum to his final report, even though all agreed that if dimethyl sulfate was gassed off by Ramirez in the ER that made so many people sick, it had absolutely nothing to do with Ramirez's death. The coroner closed his file and the finding went on to be published, fuck off, in the peer-reviewed publication Forensic Science International. There were 8 million problems with Anderson's conclusion, but we're gonna start with 2. One was more scientists were disagreeing with it than agreeing with it. Some of the dissenters were world-class toxicologists who said it was chemically impossible for hospital-administered oxygen to set off this reaction. 2 was Ramirez's family adamantly denied that she was self-medicating with DMSO. The interest in the Ramirez case was far from over. Many people knew DMSO would be present in minute amounts in most people's bodies and called bullshit. It's a common ingredient in processed food and metabolizes well with a quick pass-through rate in the urinary tract. In Ramirez's case, she had a urinary tract blockage which triggered the renal failure which triggered the heart attack. If it wasn't for the blockage, the DMSO probably wouldn't have even been detected. So that is the whole game changer of this, right? Most people are going to have very small traces of this in their system from the food they eat. And I guess Livermore didn't know that? Like, how? So anyways, yeah, her urinary tract was backed up, and that's the only reason they saw that very small trace of DMSO in the fucking first place. On the sidelines, there were people strongly saying another chemical would give the same ammonia-like gassing off toxins that ticked all the symptom boxes. Methylamine. Methylamine is not rare. It's produced in huge quantities as a cleaning agent, often shipped in pressurized railroad cars, but it's tightly controlled by the government. That's because methylamine can be used for biological terrorism and for cooking meth. That's right, methylamine is a highly sought-after precursor used in manufacturing methamphetamines. Remember Breaking Bad and the Lynx Walt and Jesse go to steal methylamine? Remember the precautions they take in handling the methylamine. Well, back before Breaking Bad, the New Times LA ran a story giving an alternative theory of what happened to make the toxic lady toxic. Whether the Times got a tip or some inside information, they did not say. What they did say was that Riverside County was one of the largest methamphetamine manufacturing and distribution points in America, and that Riverside hospital workers had been smuggling out methylamine to sell to meth cooks. Hospitals routinely use methylamine as a disinfectant and cleaning agents, including sterilizing surgical instruments. The Times report said Riverside hospital workers used IV bags to capture and store methylamine, as the IV bags were sealed, safe to handle, and entirely inconspicuous. The story theorized that an IV bag loaded with an about-to-be smuggled methylamine accidentally found its way into the ER and got plugged into Gloria Ramirez's arm. Because methylamine turns to gas so quickly when exposed to oxygen, this would explain why no traces were found in the toxicology testing. It all went into the air and into the lungs of 23 people. What's interesting is that a former coroner has written about this. He said that he would be skeptical of this methylamine theory except for personal knowledge of a similar case. That's right. One of his staff had attended a death where a meth cook had methylamine get away from him in a hidden lab. The victim made it outside yelling for help but shortly succumbed. The civilians, hearing his cries, rushed over and were immediately overpowered with the exact symptoms as the Riverside medical people experienced. The first responders also succumbed to toxic fumes and had to back off. By the time the staff member arrived to view the body, many contaminated people were already at the hospital. This colleague then signed off on the death as an accident, declined to do an autopsy, and sent the body straight to the crematorium, accompanied by guys in hazmat suits with the body sealed in a metal container and strapped to a flat deck truck. Wise man. So do we buy the Times methylamine theory? We can think about Occam's razor. When you have two conflicting hypotheses for the same puzzle, the simpler answer is usually correct. Some 1 in a billion complex chemical reaction that world-leading toxicologists say can't be done, or some low-life crooked hospital drone letting an IV bag full of stolen methylamine get away from them. Which one would you choose? Then, a third autopsy of poor Gloria was done. An independent forensic pathologist examined the body of Gloria Ramirez at the request of her family, which was given the body after weeks of court battles. But the findings of pathologist Richard Fukumoto didn't shed much more light on Ramirez's death or the workers' sicknesses than the two autopsies performed by the Riverside County Coroner's Office. Quote, "There's no physical evidence for why she died," end quote, said family attorney Ronald Schwartz. During the 2-hour autopsy, Fukumoto determined that cervical cancer, from which Ramirez was suffering, did not kill her. But Fukumoto wasn't able to determine what did. The county has not released autopsy results pending the conclusion of its investigation. Unlike the county-run autopsies, Fukumoto and his assistant took only normal precautions while examining the body. County coroner's officials dressed in airtight suits and used oxygen tanks when they performed their autopsies. Ramirez's sister, Maggie Ramirez Garcia, said family members were glad they could get answers about the body other than those provided by the county. They have accused the county of a cover-up in Ramirez's death. "It's a little late, but it's given us some relief," she said. "I found 2 articles that state this, which is macabre." Quote, "The family's pathologist was unable to determine a cause of death because Ramirez's heart was missing, her other organs were cross-contaminated with fecal matter, and her body was too severely decomposed," end quote. 2 months after Ramirez died and tons of court battles between the county and the family, her body was released for an independent autopsy and finally a burial. A judge ordered the county to release her body to her family in an airtight coffin after weeks of court battles. He did not order a release of information about the origins of the mystery illness. Judge Victor Misely issued the order after accusing officials of being insensitive. Family members gathered with friends for a yard sale to raise money for the funeral. Many people stopped by with contributions, even if they didn't buy the baby clothes, shoes, books, cupcakes, and sodas on display, said Gloria's sister. "They're small donations, but at this point every little bit helps," she said. On April 20th, 1994, 10 weeks after her death, Gloria was buried at Olivewood Memorial Park in Riverside. Her family had a quiet service for her, which they had been pleading for. "They waited for this a long time," said friend of the family, Reverend Brian Taylor. At Olivewood Cemetery, a dozen television cameras shot the scene from 50 yards away as Reverend Taylor sang Amazing Grace, one of Gloria's favorite songs. Her brother Eddie Ochoa released 3 balloons that soared upwards to symbolize her spirit. Quote, "It's been so hard for us to accept her death because of all the suffering she went through, the pain," end quote, her sister Maggie said at a private mortuary service. "Now it's time for her to rest and have the dignity she deserves," she said. We have a couple more things to tie up here. Remember Dr. Julie from the Riverside Hospital who fell ill that fateful night, who called straight up bullshit on the findings of mass hysteria? We love her. She's the best. But let's go back to her because she took the biggest hit that day, and listen to this shit. So Dr. Julie Gorchinsky's once promising career as a physician is in jeopardy. She may never be able to walk again without crutches. At age 33, both of her knees have to be surgically replaced. All she wants to know is why. Gorchinsky was the emergency room physician on duty February 19th when Gloria Ramirez was wheeled into Riverside General Hospital. Ramirez died a short time later. but Dr. Gorczynski nearly lost her life as well from lung complications. She still suffers from a crippling bone condition in her knees, necrosis in her knees. The bizarre incident left her emotionally damaged as well. She lives with recurring nightmares and depression, even flashbacks. Officially, the Ramirez incident is still labeled as a medical mystery. No scientific explanation has ever been offered. The county coroner's office said test results failed to point to any cause for the toxic odor that caused Dr. Gorczynski's problems. A coroner's investigation suggested it was the smell of death that caused workers to pass out. That is not good enough. The coroner has refused to release the results of the Gloria Ramirez autopsy, even though the information it contains might help shed some light on what caused Gorczynski's strange ailments. Some have pointed to mistakes in the investigation. Yeah, you think. They say the coroner's office botched the investigation so badly that the cause will never be known. The incident has even become a political issue in the June coroner's primary between coroner Scotty Hill and challenger Ricardo Diaz. Let me guess who wins. Not Scotty Hill. Dr. Gorczynski now says she intends to file a $6 million lawsuit against the county because of her injuries. The family of Gloria Ramirez has already sued the county for the manner in which the case was handled. For the coroner's office to keep the public in the dark about what happened to Julie Gorczynski and her co-workers is unprofessional and irresponsible. The stonewalling must end. We believe county supervisors should order the coroner to release the official report on the Ramirez incident, not only because it might provide some answers for Dr. Gorczynski, but to help ensure the health and safety of patients and employees at Riverside General Hospital. That is a news article, by the way. I feel so bad for Dr. Julie. I hope she fully recovers. I hope nobody ever fucking dares to call her a hysterical woman ever again, because clearly something happened that night. And the one thing I know for sure is that it was not mass hysteria. I wish after all of this, I had the answers as to what happened here. I really do. But I mean, the biggest takeaway is that something happened. A chain of events of some sort. What got Gloria ill? She was not dying from her cancer. It was not the cancer. What made the staff incredibly ill? With Julie having lifelong complications from it. Something. So we can rule out mass hysteria, at least. We can also rule out that Gloria was eating and coating herself in grease solvent. So, I mean, I might not have the answers, but there are some things we can rule out, and that is better than nothing. But what actually happened that day is still a mystery, mostly due to a really shitty investigation by the state, the hospital, and the medical examiner. I mean, I think it's two things. So I think either Gloria, at the point before falling ill and being rushed to the ER, came into contact with an unknown substance of some sort that made her sick and made the sequence of events happen the way they did. Or maybe it was the hospital's fault, their ventilation system, something up with that. Possibly, but they did get it inspected. They seem to be up to code, and hospitals are incredibly sanitized, even though they have a pretty bad history with the health department. But, I'm not completely sold on that. Or the methylamine was in an IV bag that they unknowingly used on Gloria Ramirez. I mean, it's either that or some kind of contact with something before she got really ill and before she went to the hospital. It's one of the two. I think with Occam's razor, I live in California. I know about Riverside, okay? Some fucking paid staff member at that hospital wanted to make some side money and was storing methylamine in an IV bag. Seems the most likely answer of them all, for sure. Far more possible than all of the other theories and unknowns. Sorry, Riverside, but you're kind of trashy. Wish I knew what had happened in Gloria's day leading up to her getting ill, where she was, who she was with, what she did she go to the store? Like, I would love to know what led up to that. If anything unusual had happened, if she did anything unusual, came into contact with something weird. They didn't even look into that, but that's what I would have done, and I wish I had more information on that. The one thing that we can take away, that's the biggest thing, is that this is not Gloria Ramirez's fault, and she was not a toxic lady. I hate that name for her, I really do. And let's not forget what a terrifying and painful death she had. Like, that is horrible for her and her family. She did not deserve that. Gloria Ramirez was a normal woman, and I say that with the utmost respect. But I think that is what her family would want people to know most of all. She was born on January 11th, 1963 in Riverside, California, where she would live for most of her life. Upon reaching adulthood, Gloria married and had two beautiful children, a daughter named Evelyn and a son named Angel Jr. Eventually, her marriage came to an end, and she and her husband divorced. Gloria continued to live in Riverside along with her two children and her fiancé. Reverend Brian Taylor called her a friend to everyone she ever met and a jokester who brought joy to others. She was only 31 years old when she passed away. So young. What happened to Gloria Ramirez has fascinated people for years. But here is the thing. By all accounts, she was fun, joyful, loving, and just a wonderful woman. What Gloria Ramirez was not is toxic. Gloria Ramirez's body might have had something happen to it at the hospital or leading up to her hospital stay, but that is not her legacy. She was so much more than that to everyone who knew her and loved her, and she was gone far too soon. To everyone who loved her, she was just Gloria. Press around the world portrayed Ramirez as a freak or an alien, said Melody Barnett, who is married to Ramirez's nephew. She was a normal person, like me and you, Barnett said. And that is the story of Gloria Ramirez. Tragic. Everything that happened after that night, so frustrating. Who is putting these people in charge of anything is what I want to know. I will have her beautiful, beautiful photo on the website and on social media. She's gorgeous, and let's just remember her and her family, and let's not call her the toxic lady because she's just beautiful Gloria. And now for animals. They're fucking cool. Koalas have fingerprints just like humans. In 1975, police took fingerprints from 6 chimpanzees and 2 orangutans housed at zoos in England. They weren't just looking for a unique souvenir, they were testing to see if any unsolved crimes could be the fault of these banana-eating miscreants. While these primates ended up being as innocent as they seemed, the police did determine that their fingerprints were indistinguishable from a human's without careful inspection. A few years later, in 1996, a different type of mammal came under police suspicions, the koala. While it makes sense that orangutans and chimpanzees would have fingerprints like us, being some of our closest relatives, koalas are evolutionarily distant from humans. It turns out that fingerprints are an excellent example of convergent evolution, or different species developing similar traits independently from each other. Fingerprints are thought to serve 2 purposes. First, they aid in grip, allowing an animal to better hold onto rough surfaces like branches and tree trunks. Second, they increase the sensitivity of our touch and allow us a finer level of perception regarding the textures and shapes of the things we hold. Why this is useful for humans is obvious. Our hands are made to grasp, hold, and manipulate objects. Why did that make me go to a dirty place? Whether it's some nuts we foraged, okay, it's low-hanging fruit, I'm not gonna do it. Or for our Xbox controller, we humans spend all day every day relying on our sensitive sense of touch. For koalas, it's not really so different. They are incredibly picky eaters, showing strong preferences for eucalyptus leaves of a certain age. It seems that their fingerprints allow them to thoroughly inspect their food before they eat it. Police aren't exactly worried about koala bank robbers, but it is possible that koala fingerprints could be found incidentally at a crime scene and be mistaken for a human's, making it pretty difficult to find a match. And that is it for today's episode. I hope you found it interesting. It was definitely the methylamine. And I will talk to y'all real soon. Okay, bye! Full source notes are available at mistressofthemacablepodcast.com, as well as photos pertaining to each episode. Follow along on Instagram for all the insane and gory photos at Mistress of